In this lesson, I'm going to demonstrate some of the advanced concepts when working with lists. And I'm also going to show you how to create objects and then create our own classes as well. So here I am. I'm using the Sublime editor for my Python. And this is a good editor. You can go to Sublime and Google it, download it, and install it. You can also use the Python idle. But when you're actually writing programs and code, these editors are helpful because they not only give you color coding, but also gives you the ease that is required as a programmer. So let's go ahead and let's start with our advanced lists, for instance. So I'm going to just give a comment here, something like working with advanced lists. So here I'm going to create a list, for instance, nums equals, and then my list, and these are just random numbers. I'm just going to put 3, 4, 7, 8, and 9. And the reason why you don't see the color code because I haven't saved my Python file yet. So I'm going to quickly save this first, and I'm just going to name it working advanced lists or something like that. You can name it the way you want. Click save, and notice our color codes now appear within our list. And next I'm also going to put a comment here so you can see that these indexes are essentially starting with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we have 5 indexes. So these are the indexes. So for instance, just a basic simple list that we have so far. If I were to, let's say, do a print and do nums, and would like to find out where the index is. For instance, I need to see what is at index 4, and I run this. Notice on the bottom in my output window, it shows 2. So here the second index is at 2, okay, because we start with 0, 1, and 2. So the value or the number 4 exists at index 2. So pretty straightforward. Of course, I can always do something like delete nums, and if I wish to delete just the 2, I could do that. I will just delete it to test it out. Just do a print nums, Control B to run it. And notice the output window says it's 1, 3, 7, 8, and 9. So my index 2, which is number 4, has been now deleted. If I need to insert something, I can always insert within my list, such as nums. I can use the insert and then specify first the index and then the number that I wish to insert. So for example, if I wish to insert at index 1, then I can just say 1 and then the number 10. Run it and then print out to see the results of our new insertion of the number 10. And notice it says 1, 10, 3, 7, 8, and 9. So the number 10 was inserted before 3, which is our first index. Now moving forward, we can also insert another list within this list. So for example, right now I have my nums equals 1, 3, 4, 7, 8, and 9. It's a simple list. If I need to add another list to this list, I could do so. So for instance, I can simply say use the method nums insert and then specify the index first, because this is where we're going to insert something, and what that something is essentially another list. So I'm just going to open up another list. I'm going to say 33, 44, and let's say 22. Run it and make sure we see our output, and here's our output. So now we have a list within a list. Okay, so we have 33, 44, 22 embedded inside our existing list. Okay. So it's a good way where you can use the insert method to insert or embed another list. Now we can also use the initializer syntax. And what that is for instance, within our list, if we need to, for instance, square these numbers, okay, or square all numbers that are within this list, or we can have 10, 20, 30, or 50, or 100, 1,000 numbers, for instance, and we want to square these numbers. Obviously, having all these numbers is going to take a long time for you to square them step by step. Well, Python gives us the initialization syntax, which allows us to square these numbers right within our list, for example. Okay, let me demonstrate this and then I'll explain how this actually works. So here's our list, nums equals, and then I'm going to open up my list again, And I'm going to say x squared, just do a for loop for x and then specify my range. And the range could be the actual numbers that you want to square. So if I need to square 10 numbers, I can write 10, 20, 30, or 1,000. So let's say if I were to do 1,000 numbers and then do another if, and this is again, if I need to do an additional condition, for example, I could do so. But if not, let me first run this first so we can actually see. So let me save this, run it, see the output by printing nums. And at the bottom, notice what Python does, it lists 1,000 numbers and squares them. Okay, how do we know? For instance, it starts with 0, 0 squared 0 is 0, and then 1 is 1, and then 2 square, 3 square, 4 square, 5 square, and so on. Okay, so it takes 1,000 numbers to square each one of them. If I were to say just 10, for instance, and run this, it'll just square the 10 numbers. And of course, I can always add a condition. So for instance, if I say something like if x% 2 equals 0. Okay, let's run this. And in this instance, it only lists the even numbers. So for example, 4, 16, 36, and 64. So here, from within my 10 numbers, I added a condition called if x equals to 0. So this way we can work with lists, and it's a pretty powerful feature in Python when you work with lists. So you can manipulate lists any which way you can. You can embed lists, you can use the initializer syntax as well. Next, quickly I want to demonstrate how to add an object or create our own class, because you can take this entire list and then obviously work with building your own classes and so on. So next I'm going to create a class, and I'm going to quickly demonstrate this, how to create our own classes. So for example, let me get rid of this here and just do a class, for example, employee, and just set a simple base. Okay, so this will be our common class base for all employees. And then our employee count is a variable. Set that to 0 and create a simple definition here and do the init and specify the self, name, and salary. Okay, so a few things regarding this particular employee. And then define those. So self.name equals name, self.salary would equal salary, and then finally the employee.emp count plus equals to 1. Next, to another def function here, and in this function I'm going to display, right? So I'm going to display the count for our employees. For example, the first one is self, and then I'm going to print the output. So I'm going to say print total employee count here, for example, and then specify our modulus, and then call it employee.emp count. All right, just to test it out and make sure we have everything correct. Okay, I need to have the colon here. That's why my color coding was not shown. All right, do another def for the salary and print the name here, for instance. So do a display employee self, and then do the print, and this time I'm going to print out the name of the employee and then the self name, comma, and then of course also display the salary. And then once the salary is displayed, I need to make sure I have the required space, and then do the self salary. Okay, great. So what this would do essentially is create our objects, and next we need to create these objects within our class that we created called employee. So for instance, let me put a comment here quick. So this is going to create first object of our employee class. So here our first object would be, let's say, employee1 equals employee, and then our first employee would be, let's say, Greg. Make sure I have my quotations on. And then the salary of Greg would be, let's say, 5,000. Next, my employee would be EMP2, and do the same thing. So this would be Chris, for instance, and his salary would be 7,000. And then do the display for both of these. So I want to do EMP1 dot display employee, and then do the same for EMP2 dot display employee, and then finally do the print. And let's see the output of our total employee. Of course, I can always copy and paste from the top as well if the code is similar. Okay, so I'm going to do a D here, and then do an employee, finally the EMP count. So just following the code here, we created our class called employee. We set the class base for employees to be 0, and then we defined the self, name, and salary for those employees. We set these variables and created multiple definitions for the employee count and then the name, and finally we created our objects within this class. So let's save this, run it. All right, gave me a syntax error, and I know right off the bat that the syntax error is somewhere here because our color coding is not correct in this line. And this is probably because, let's verify one more time, we have our employee.emp count, and then we have our definition, display count is fine. And then we simply print the employee dot. Okay, here it is. So we use the capital C here for the employee count, and of course we need to also either change this, run it again, and the reason why it still doesn't work is because our first line should have a colon instead of a semicolon. Okay, so just these few mistakes will ruin your entire code. Okay, so make sure when we use these editors we follow the correct color coding. All right, wonderful. So let's save this, run this, see what happens. Didn't like the indented block, for instance. All right, let's fix our indents here. Make sure we have things right. And here's our class, which is correct, because we need to indent all of our code and make sure it's following the correct syntax. And now if I run it, perfect. So we get the name, which is Greg, salary is 5,000. And then the next name is Chris, salary is 7,000. And our total number of employees are 2. So this way we can create our own classes and work with them. So I hope this helps. Practice working with the advanced lists and then creating classes and working with objects and defining those objects within those classes as well. And of course, once you have the class created, you can call it anywhere within your code. So I hope this helps. Practice, and let's move to our next lesson.